Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining session 2 of the Progressive Power Trading Series. Sorry, I like Oprah. She sounds like that. As people are joining us from around the country, let's get to know one another. Please share in the chat your first name, your pronouns, where you're viewing this training from, and one word to describe how you are feeling right now. Again, in the chat, because we are a community, so let's talk. Please share your name, your pronouns, where you're viewing this training from. Now, it could be your living room, it could be, at your friend's house, at your mama's house, wherever. And the one word to describe how you are feeling right now. I will start. My name is Chris Percy. I am the Director of Member Learning at MoveOn. My pronouns are he, him, and I am from the west side of Chicago. Sorry. My one word is energized. Energized. And I'm going to hold on to that energy because I'm going to need a lot of it. There's a lot of work to be done, and I hope you feel energized as well. I am so ready to dig in with all of you and engage with you as we understand our role, talk about our power, and think about our impact this election cycle. So I hope you're sharing with everyone in the chat. Yes, please. Thank you. While you're doing that, I want to welcome you. Before we get into today's program, I would like to welcome all people, identities, feelings into this brave and safe space for learning. I welcome your curiosity, your righteous indignation, your anger, your grief, your joy, your determination, and your passion. We would like to welcome people who are new to MoveOn, who have never really heard of us and may have had a friend tell you, hey, maybe join this call with me. To those of you who have been in the fight with us for a long time, welcome to you as well. People who have been touched by COVID-19 in any way, we welcome you. Whether you're a survivor, thriver, or people just holding it together for today, you are welcome in this space. People of all identities, backgrounds, ethnicities, abilities, and of all ages, people who feel comfortable with technology, and people who are trying to figure out what this thing called Twitch is. We thank you and welcome you to this space. We welcome those who have made it possible for us to be here, our caregivers, our ancestors, our beloveds. Welcome to everybody who is here with us today. We are ready to support and empower you, and we look forward to getting some energy back from you. So thank you for being here, and let's dig in. So tonight, we are here for part 2 of the Progressive Power Training Series. If you attended session 1 2 weeks ago, let us know in the chat that you were with us. Go ahead and shout yourself out. It's okay to brag, okay? Now, you only get, a little bit of points because I don't have anything to give you, but we want to know that you were with us and want to give you credit. Also, if you did last week's homework, let us know that you did the homework. Again, you get points in spirit. But we really thank you for digging in and also becoming part of the community that did their homework together. So last time we convened, we heard from our executive director, Rana Epting, and she reminded us that we are the movers and shakers of the Democratic electorate. We are a community of action takers. We always have been. That's what MoveOn is, right? She really dug in to who MoveOn is and who you have been to MoveOn. Then Representative Pramila Jayapal gave us a rundown of what's happening in Washington and what's at stake in this election season. And if you missed it, please take time to go and look on our website, moveon.org/progressive power, because Vivian Chang laid the foundation for power mapping that we will build upon this evening. But if you missed it, please go back and watch it because it was really dope. And I took tons of notes and I've been through many power mapping trainings. It was really, really great. So yes, please share with us if you was with us this last session. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this series is a three-part training series around power mapping, right? And we are specifically mapping out our role in this political moment. And that includes us collectively as an organization and you individually. We will focus on our power, how we define it and how we wield it. And lastly, we will focus on how we can make an impact together, both in our communities and in our country, right? Today, we will continue to talk about what is at stake this year, because there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on in the country. And even in the last 2 weeks since we've last spoken, there's been so much that has happened. So we're definitely going to talk about that today as well. So I'm excited to dig into that a little bit later. So again, if you missed the first session though, please go and see the full recording at moveon.org/progressive power. You can just take notes. You can take it at your own leisure. It's chock full of really great information. And that's why we do this, so you have information and have tools in this world where it just seems like so much is happening and so many voices are out there. So this space is a space for us to come together, to be inspired, to learn, to strategize, and prepare for what's ahead. I want each of us to walk away with some additional skills we can use this midterm season, and also in our own organizing, in our own communities. This is multi-purpose. It's not just for the election season, but these skills can be used in your everyday organizing. So during our time together, I encourage you to take your pen, okay? Get your pen, get your paper. I always write stuff in sticky notes because I'm weird like that. But get your pen and paper or whatever method you use for taking notes. We ask that you engage others respectfully in the chat. We ask that you ask questions in the chat. This is a safe space. We have chat moderators that are online to help you with any questions. And if we see a trend of questions, we might answer it live on air just to make sure that you have what you need. We ask that you be open to new information. We don't all have the answers. That's why we have brought together a dope group of folks to talk to us today. And that includes me, because I am learning every day. I by no means know everything, never claim to do it. And if you ask my family, they might tell you that I don't know anything, but whatever. And then lastly, I want you to stick with us for this session and the last session. We have one more session after this in this series, which is going to be Sunday, June 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. If you've already RSVP'd for this series, don't worry, we will remind you that we are doing this. So again, make sure that you come to our last session because you will not want to miss it. It's going to be really great. So let's jump right in. Last week, we highlighted that we have a slim majority in Congress and the White House, right? But what does that mean for us, especially as we think about gaining and maintaining power? So joining us today to help us think through this is Sara Kugler from MoveOn's Federal Affairs team. Sara, we elected a Democrat to the White House and a Democratic governing majority in Congress, although it's a slim one. So Sara, can you tell us why this matters for this election cycle this year?
Yes. Hey, everybody. Okay, so we fought hard to make Trump a one-term president and elect Joe Biden to the White House, right? And it really mattered. We spent 4 years watching Trump nominate dangerous, harmful individuals to key agencies' positions. And those agencies then issued rules and regulations that worsened people's lives. But when we change who's in the White House, we change who's leading all of our nation's federal agencies and making those decisions that impact people's lives every day. And so let me share with you my very favorite example. I'm sure that you guys have seen the same stories I see about amazing union organizing, workers organizing and winning at Starbucks stores, at Amazon warehouses, And you've probably also seen that some of those companies are doing classic union busting actions, even retaliating against workers who are organizing. But workers around the country are winning. I don't know about you guys. I am inspired by every single one of these victories that I see. I cannot get enough of them. But we wouldn't necessarily have had those victories without a Democratic president. Okay, so let me break that down for a second. Stay with me. There is a federal agency called the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB. The NLRB is charged with protecting workers' rights to unionize. Under Trump, we had an anti-worker lawyer serving as general counsel of the NLRB. This was the guy whose work helped President Reagan famously bust the air traffic controllers union, okay? And he started using his authorities in ways that undermined workers' rights to unionize, to organize, instead of enforcing and protecting those rights, which is like what the NLRB is there to do. Joe Biden fired him, like the first day of his presidency. This is not a position the president normally fires. And then President Biden nominated the brilliant Jennifer Abruzzo to be general counsel of the NLRB. He swiftly nominated new board members, giving the board a majority of members appointed by Democrats. And now the NLRB is working hard to protect the rights of those workers you're reading about, the Starbucks and Amazon warehouse workers and workers around the country. They're making sure union elections are fair. They're requiring companies to reinstate workers' jobs who were retaliated against for organizing. And they're seeking to make sure that all workers who should be protected by our federal labor laws are protected by our federal labor laws. And the thing is, electing a Democratic president means we're seeing that story play out across federal agencies, across the White House. This is not a special NLRB story. You know, the Biden administration has taken action to prevent corporate investors from buying up massive amounts of distressed housing so that housing can be more affordable for families to own, for individuals to own. They rescinded the global gag rule. They're taking on corporate giants who are exercising monopoly power and hurting families right now by raising prices to give back profits to shareholders, increase CEO executive compensation packages. And the work is still gearing up. I mean, just this week, Congress confirmed the nomination of Alvaro Bedoya to the Federal Trade Commission. That's an agency that protects consumers and enforces antitrust laws. And that means that next week, tomorrow, that'll be the first time that the FTC has had a Democratic majority under President Biden. And a majority means they can start doing some serious work. So, Chris, the impact is everywhere. The Biden administration isn't just mitigating harm from 4 years of Donald Trump. It is certainly doing that, but they're also actively pursuing meaningful policies every day because we fought to elect Democrats.
Thank you so much, Sara. You know, one of the things that I really appreciate about that is so often, you know, we don't hear about these types of stories about the impact that we have when we actually win something and the work that can be done. So I really appreciate you highlighting some things that, I mean, I didn't even know at all. And I think it's important for us to be educated about what's happening and what's going on. So Sara, what's at stake in November? What should folks be thinking about when they're knocking doors and talking to neighbors about the upcoming election? Can you tell us more about that?
All right. Okay, Chris, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but the truth is everything's at stake. Sure. If Republicans in Congress pass the same extremist bills we're seeing in the states, which we can assume that they will, Biden could veto them. But what if they put those extremist provisions in our annual funding bills? The bills that, if Biden vetoed, would cause a government shutdown. What then? I mean, obviously, that's not the only potential consequence, and I could talk for hours about what's at stake. So let me narrow down on 3 things that I'm really worried about. 1, if Democrats lose control in the Senate, it is very hard to imagine that Republicans are going to move Biden's nominees and confirm them. And, nominees are the folks whose leadership and vision shapes the work that agencies take on. It's the difference between the NLRB under Trump and the NLRB under Biden that I was talking about earlier. We need confirmed nominees so that agencies can exercise their full authorities to do good work on behalf of the people. To do the work that we elected Democrats to do. Republicans have already been voting in a unified bloc against numerous Biden administration nominees. Incredibly qualified, brilliant individuals for roles that desperately need to be filled. And there's a dark money conservative group specifically working to derail the nominations of these folks. They have even been successful with getting a few nominations derailed already. If we lost even our slim Democratic majority, I don't see any reason to believe that Republicans will suddenly turn around and start supporting Biden's nominees. So, bad news. Second, if we lose the House and the Senate, Republicans can use their majority to overturn rulemaking from the Biden administration via the Congressional Review Act. I know it sounds technical. I promise it's super duper simple. The Congressional Review Act allows Congress to invalidate a final agency rule. So just Biden administration does something good, Republicans in Congress say no, and it doesn't happen. And when a new Congress starts, which is what's going to happen in January 2023, they even get to reach backwards and take on final rules issued in the prior 60 days. Republicans use the Congressional Review Act to overturn more than a dozen rules from the Obama administration. So all that good work from the Biden administration I mentioned earlier, we can lose that. Also bad news. Okay. And then the third thing, the judiciary. We all know that Republicans have been relentlessly packing the courts, including with unqualified, extreme nominees. And this is just the Supreme Court. It's judges at every level. We know that Republicans refused to move President Obama's judicial nominees, including to the Supreme Court when they took power in the Senate. And we know that Mitch McConnell has already suggested a Republican-controlled Senate would not confirm a Biden nominee to the Supreme Court in 2024. I know that I viscerally feel the impact of our conservative-packed Supreme Court, and it is not a one election cycle problem. It is a generational problem. Unless we expand our Democratic majority, reshape the judiciary, and expand the Supreme Court. So on that, Chris, I want to throw back to you because I know we have some amazing folks here to talk with us about that leaked Supreme Court draft opinion that would overturn Roe v. Wade.
Thank you so much, Sara, and thank you for preparing us for the next segment. But before we go to that next segment, I just want to briefly, in the spirit of recent events, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge the things that happened yesterday in Buffalo, the shooting, and to the victims and to the families of the victims. I just really want to just show up. Though I'm from Chicago, I send all my energy that way. And please, let's take just a couple of seconds to really just think about those who lost their lives in Buffalo. Thank you very much. I would be remiss not to lift them up in this moment, and especially as we're together in this community. So, Sara talked a lot about things that are at stake, what things that are happening right now, the potential of things that can happen. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, there are things that have happened in the last 2 weeks that have upended so much in this country. And we have been showing up, and there's a lot of work that will need to happen to show up. And so I would love to introduce my colleague, Mana Kharrazi, because she is so dope and she is so wonderful. And I'm so glad to call her a colleague. She does so much great work in our campaigns team as a campaign director, leading on so many different issues. And I'm so honored and privileged to really lift up her work and the things that she's been doing with MoveOn and even in her own personal organizing. So I would like to turn it over to Mana.
Thank you, Chris. I'm, as always, a huge fan. Thank you for welcoming me tonight. It's my pleasure, though we're not going to be talking about the most exciting things. We're honored to have Sonja Spoo with us tonight. So Sonja Spoo is the director of reproductive rights campaigns at UltraViolet. She works to conceive of and launch rapid response campaigns for UV. Prior to joining UV, Sonja organized activists, students, and lawmakers from around the country to fight for reproductive rights from a faith-based understanding with Catholics for Choice. Sonja began her journey in grassroots organizing 9 years ago in Philly, and her advocacy focuses on the intersections between faith, gender, and race. Sonja is a graduate of Swarthmore College, where she majored in political science. You can find her in DC. Some of you may have seen her yesterday at the mobilization there. She currently lives there, and she is a big fan of coffee, consumes large amounts, and spends time cuddling as many dogs as possible. I had to include that part because we need anything positive we can have in this moment. So happy to have you under these unfortunate issues, but we're grateful for your knowledge and your insight we're going to have tonight. So let's welcome Sonja as a MoveOn fam. So Sonja, you're going to be talking to us tonight in this moment as we are on the precipice of Roe v. Wade most likely being overturned. And we've all been, a lot of us were out in the streets yesterday. A lot of us have been pretty much devastated since the leak. And I wanted to take a moment, it's very likely it's going to happen, for you to share with us, what are the ramifications for us on a state level? What does it mean if Roe does become overturned in a few weeks?
Yeah, of course. First, thank you so much for having me, Chris and Mana. Super excited to be here at the MoveOn family. Again, I was able to also attend a previous Power Summit, so I feel really lucky to be with y'all again. And thank you to everyone who made it out to either the in-person marches and rallies across the country. We had over 450 marches across the country and actions, and well over 1 million to 2 million people out in the streets in total, including 40,000 here in DC. So thank you to everyone who made it out and raised your voices, and to those who took part in the virtual rallies as well. So I don't want to mince words. What we saw in the draft leaked opinion, while abortion is still legal right now, the opinion has not officially come out. What we saw in that opinion shows a really clear roadmap for where Republicans are willing to go and what this court is willing to let pass. And that is to overturn the reversal of Roe and Casey. And what that means in real practical terms is that likely by the end of this year, up to 26 states in this country, so the majority of states in this country, will have severely restricted or completely banned abortion, since there's no longer a federal right to it. So even with Roe in the books right now, we know that, women of color, Indigenous women, Black women, people in rural settings, poor people, young people, all across this country already have significantly depleted access to abortion care. You had to, many people across the country had to travel out of state. It's certainly true now in Texas, since SB 8 went into effect last fall. It's also now, unfortunately, going to be true in Oklahoma, and Roe is still in the books. So Roe is always the floor and not the ceiling of access, Mana. It was always insufficient of itself, but it was important to have a constitutional right, because it at least allowed us to fight and continue to fight back against, increasingly more extreme bans, and to also continue to push forward where we could really amazing and progressive policy. Because we do see both those things happening. We're seeing bans happening, but we're also seeing really amazing policy coming out of certain states as well. But Roe was always the floor and not the ceiling. And so without Roe in the books, though, we are going to see a reality where people will just have to continue to travel even further distances out of state for care. The biggest concern we have is criminalization both the criminalization of abortion provision, so abortion providers facing criminal charges or outcomes for providing care, and then also, of course, the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes, which we've already seen in this country, that we'll see a great deal more as state bans go into effect. And as we know, police and state violence are always, disproportionately felt by communities of color. And that sort of level of surveillance that we'll see over pregnancy outcomes, over miscarriages, will only increase as states move to ban abortion. So the ramifications are far-reaching. The opinion both, foretold not only abortion access being restricted or banned, but also a deep sense of disdain that Justice Alito had for any, quote unquote, not deeply rooted rights, which is the number of rights that we have fought for and gained over the last 70 years. Because our Constitution did not include us when it was written as people of color, as women, as people who didn't possess land, And so this fight is so much larger than just one issue. It's about a far right capture of our institutions and our need to organize and to build power to fight back against that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I learned a lot from just what you said right now, and I'm taking notes, and I hope our members are too. You had some incredible comments and insight to share with us, but I do want to ask you, we do have a lot of our members who are very active on this as part of this training series. What can we do? What should we be prepared to do? We talk about building and organizing power. We've been talking about that for years under Trump, and now in this moment, what should we be doing?
I think first and foremost, continue to raise your voice. So, the protests that happened yesterday were great and amazing, but they weren't the only protests happening. People have been in the streets since the plea decision happened. We had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets with 8 hours notice after the decision happened, and last Tuesday or 2 Tuesdays ago, people have been organizing their communities ever since then. So you don't need to wait for an organization, like MoveOn or like UltraViolet or Planned Parenthood to organize a protest. You can organize in your own community, right? Voting is critical. I know voting feels like it doesn't quite meet the moment given where we're at, but one thing that we've learned is that when you vote in large numbers, we do win. We've seen this in 2020, as well in 2018, that when we vote in large numbers, progressives do win because ultimately the ideas that we have are the popular majority ideas. And that's critical for abortion rights because the same people who are funding abortion bans, the same people who are introducing and voting for and signing into law abortion bans are the same ones who are trying to vote for and pass voter suppression laws. Political autonomy and bodily autonomy go hand in hand. And the other side understands that you need to restrict both of them in order to exert power and control, right? So we need to continue to exercise our right to vote, continue to put pressure on our lawmakers here in DC. They still have several months of lawmaking they can be doing, right? They don't need to just be on the campaign trail. They also need to be doing their jobs here in DC. And putting pressure on them to pass the Voting Rights Act, to pass federal protections for abortion rights. So continue to do that work as well. Also, get involved in your local community. There are abortion funds across the country. You can go to abortionfunds.org or nnaf.org to find a local abortion fund to give to. Same thing with clinicians, with clinic providers, Planned Parenthood, and independent clinic providers who help provide abortion care, as well as a whole range of reproductive health care. But voting and organizing your community is so important. We need to have more pro-choice champions in the Senate, in particular here in DC, but it's not just about DC. It's also about the states. Republicans have captured a large majority of the states across the country in terms of the state legislature, but also local governments, school boards, your state Supreme Court, if some states have elections for those, right? Up and down the ballot, we need to be making sure that progressive candidates are getting the votes that they need to get into power. So don't just focus on what's happening in DC. State legislators are just as important. And in many ways, your voice carries a lot more weight in your state because it might be that that state lawmaker only gets 5 calls on an issue. And what if you can organize 10 calls, right? how much more powerful can that be at a state level? So, really focus not just on what's happening here in DC, but what's happening in your state. The abortion bans, the anti-trans bills, the don't say gay bills, the voter suppression laws are coming from the states. They're not coming from the federal government. So I would encourage folks to really dig in, really understand who is running for your local, your state house position, your state assembly position, who's running for your city council, who's on your school board for your child or your nephew or your loved ones, whatever it may be, because they're organizing that deep level. We need to out-organize that as well.
Thank you so much for that. I have one question for you because you're brilliant. You've just taught us so much tonight. You've been in this fight for a while, and this has been a really difficult one. And obviously for a lot of folks, I mean, I'm in Georgia, so like it feels sometimes insurmountable in terms of just what we're dealing with. And in the moments when it's going to hurt our heart, do you have any advice about how we can sustain ourselves as folks who are fighting on this?
Definitely rest. I think, one thing I've said to a lot of people is, at least in the abortion rights movement is, the anti-abortion movement has been doing almost like siege warfare, right? They have been, constantly taking us to court, since I've been in the movement, I've been in this work now for, almost 12 years. And it's about every other year we've had to go to the Supreme Court to defend the right to abortion access or to defend birth control or any number of things. And they do that because they want to continue to exhaust us. They want to continue to grind us down. And so we can't we have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, resting, taking breaks, in order to keep doing this work, because otherwise you will burn out. It is just the fact that we all have so much capacity, right? And we have to make sure that we're working on restoration the same way we're working on giving back to folks as well. So for me, I always look to my community, both for accountability and also for restoration. I take breaks. I find whatever, I go on hikes all the time, just to get out into nature and stuff. But continuing to build a community around you is so important. There is no heroes in this story, right? There's only community. There's no one person that can save us. There's no one thing that will save us. It's a combination of efforts together and a combination of actions together. And so don't feel like, you need to have all the answers or that you need to know all the right things to do in your community. Because if you are building a community around you, others will, build with you. And, in my tradition, my faith tradition, we say, iron sharpens iron. I think that's really true in organizing as well. And when you build in community, instead of trying to do things on your own, you also build in space to take rest and step back as well, because you're not trying to do everything on your own. So look to community, find that action that also gives you peace, that can be your rest. But just always make sure you're making time for rest, for family, and for just taking a step back.
Thank you for that, Sonja. I'm glad to be in this with you for the long haul and appreciate all of your advice. And that was incredible in terms of what we can do. Chris, I'm going to give it back to you so you can teach us some more brilliance. And thank you for having us here.
Absolutely. And Sonja, thank you so much for taking time. I really appreciate you being a part of this Progressive Power series family and sharing your wisdom with us. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and really hope that you have a moment in all this to do what you said that you do, which is to chill and breathe and take a sip of water and put your feet up, because this is a long fight. This is a marathon, and it can be exhausting, and it is a tactic out there to exhaust the folks who are working those front lines. So I just want to say that we support the work that is happening, and you being one of the generals in it, we just want to appreciate you and all that you do. And Mana, you too, you lead the work that we do here at MoveOn. So I just want to also admonish you to do the same thing. So thank you both so much for being with us tonight, and really appreciate your leadership and your guidance and your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mana. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. All right, folks. Well, the great thing about now is we get to get some tools, right? So what I love about this series is we give you what's happening in the world, and we give you some real world scenarios. And now we're going to talk about power mapping. And the interesting thing about this is like some of these concepts that we're about to learn about actually have been pointed to in the conversation from Sara to Mana to Sonja. Like they literally have been pulling out some things. And so I am so honored to introduce my friend, my colleague, Elyssa Fetter from Rising Organizers Action to go and bring us into part 2 of the power mapping series. Now, please take time to write this down because we were talking about policy, we're talking about things that are happening. This is the part where we actually get tools to apply to our own organizing. So I have my pen and paper ready, and Elyssa, take it away.
Great, thanks, Chris. And hi, everybody. It's great to be with you on these admittedly dreary days, but it is good to be in community with all of you despite that. I'm really excited to talk to you about this training series or about this content about power mapping. I know you all started a conversation with my colleague, Vivian Chang, at the last session. I would love if you could drop in the chat if you were at that session, let me know. And if you weren't there, also let us know so that your friends, your new MoveOn friends, can welcome you, let you know what it's like to be in the party. So we're gonna get started. Let me see if I can get this. There we go, oops. Okay, so this session is part 2 of a larger conversation that we're having around power mapping. We talked last time about what a power map is. It's basically a way for you to track who has power in your community. If there's, if you want to review that session, like Chris said, that's on the MoveOn website. What we're going to talk about today is learning more about what actually motivates the people we're targeting, what actually makes the people we're trying to move. And that means we're going to have to go deep into some organizing concepts, and we'll do a little bit of review for last time so you can refresh the key points, and if you weren't there, to get you on the right page for this session. So let's jump into it. Our session today is going to go over the following things. Welcome and intros. That's where we are now. Hello, I'm Elyssa. Nice to meet you. We're going to go over organizing context, the context in which we are doing this work. We're going to talk about researching your target, and we're going to review what a target is. And we're going to talk about how you can meet with your target and some key takeaways. So again, if you've got things that are really exciting to you, interesting to you, good questions, drop them in the chat, and we will zoom on through all of this exciting information. So here's what you're going to learn today. The first is you're going to learn how to identify what motivates your target. That is the overall goal of this session. We're also going to introduce this concept called research meetings, which is one tool of a variety of tools to help you learn about what motivates your target. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how those kinds of meetings help build political power. Research meetings, I should say, are one tool in your toolbox. There are a lot of different resources out there, but we're going to talk about those in particular. So let's talk about organizing context. And in particular, what you need to know about organizing writ large in order to put this framework to work. So we just talked about with our lovely mini panel about how important it is for us to build power in our communities. What does that mean? So in organizing, we talk about power as the ability to achieve purpose. It is a completely neutral concept. So if that is a surprise to you, if that is new to you, if you thought, oh, power, I always thought that power was good or bad, drop it in the chat. Would love to hear about your experiences. But in organizing, we talk about power as being a neutral concept. And we also talk about how political power comes in 2 forms. One is organized people, and the other is organized money. And as organizers, as community organizers, and you all are now, welcome, we leverage organized people power. So MoveOn has money, right? We have this wonderful platform. I'm so happy to see you all. But the thing that they leverage to move the needle is all of you. It's not hive-powered lobbyists like oil companies have. Your oil companies use their organized money because they have a lot of it. That's what they're able to leverage. You all organized people. And that's how we get where we're going, how we're going to build the world we're looking for. We also do this through the general concept of grassroots organizing. So let's define what that is. That's bringing people together around a common goal in order to build and exercise power that can shape politics, policies, and outcomes. That's a lot of words, I know. But we've seen real life examples of this just this past weekend. Grassroots organizing is all of the people who came out to mobilize for protecting abortion rights and access in this country yesterday. That's what organizing is all about. It is bringing people together so that they can demonstrate we believe in something and we want people to act. We want our government to act on our behalf so that we're able to shape those politics, the policies, and the outcomes that are impacting our lives. So many of you have been a part of grassroots organizing, maybe without even knowing it because you've been to a protest or something like that. And if you were at a protest this weekend, again, drop it in the chat because I want to hear about your lives. So that's the context in which we think about power mapping. And we think about power mapping and our targets because we're trying to move power. We're trying to change politics and policies and outcomes. And that means we have to figure out who is actually making the decisions that impact our lives. And that involves researching your target. So in the last session, you all talked about a few concepts regarding targets. Just to review, and for our new folks, the most important thing is that your target is a person. It's an individual who holds power and influence in an institution. It is not an entire institution. So, for example, in organizing, we talk about something called self-interest. It's someone's values. And Congress has no unified set of interests, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene is fundamentally motivated by God knows what, but certainly fundamentally different things than Adam Schiff. Those are very different sets of interests. So when you're thinking about your organizing, you can't just say, I want to move Congress, because Adam Schiff already agrees with you. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is never gonna. And so you have to figure out how you're going to deal with the folks in between. And it also may not be readily apparent who is with you or against you and who has power and who doesn't. This really applies when you're thinking about activating on the local level. Some of you have probably started to look into how your government works, who has power in your community. That was your homework from last time. And also things will pop up. You will learn more about who you're targeting as you do your research. So in organizing, we also talk about two different types of targets. So primary targets are individuals who have power over what you want. They are the people who very literally make the decision to vote for something. So that can be a member of Congress, it can be a member of city council, it can be a state representative. It is the person who actually has the power over what you want. And the secondary targets are people who have power over your primary targets. All of us, spoilers, all of us, the people, are secondary targets. So sometimes you will do stuff, you'll have a petition, you'll have a protest that is there to mobilize your secondary targets so you can have more power. But you want to make sure you know who you're targeting. So when you're thinking about your targets, you want to think about who's my primary target and who has power over them. Sometimes that's all of us, that's the people. Sometimes it's major donors. Sometimes it's really influential religious figures in a community. These are things you have to research and find out. And when you're thinking about the self-interest of a target, you want to think about what it is that motivates this person to act or to not act. That's the definition of self-interest. And though you may not know the self-interest of your target, you may not know their values, what gets them out of bed in the morning, we can usually guess that it falls into one of two categories. One is self-preservation. People want to keep their jobs. I want to keep my job. Chris wants to keep his job. This is very normal. And it's a good thing to recognize and to deal with. The second is self-actualization. This can be really living up to a specific moral code. Chris and I also like to live up to a specific moral code. But a problem that progressives often run into is that we expect our leadership, our members of Congress, to behave in altruistic ways because we do. But that's usually not the thing that motivates them. Usually they are motivated by self-preservation, by keeping their job and keeping their name out of the press and not having any headaches. And that's fine. We just need to accept and acknowledge that. So you don't want to assume the self-interest of your target is the same as yours, or that they'll do something because it's the right thing to do. And I want to say that sucks. Like, that really just sucks. I wish people with power would do things because it is right. And sometimes they do. But very often, especially in today's political climate, we really need to push them to do it. And we see this in real time in the way that we have seen Republicans like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski say that they are supporters of abortion rights and express deep concern about the potential upcoming Roe decision, and also not vote to advance bills that would codify Roe and codify access to abortion. That is because they have made a determination that it is in the interest of their self-preservation to not vote for those bills, even though in an ideal self-actualized world, they'd be voting for them. And again, continue to emphasize, that sucks. It's just the reality that we have to deal with. And that's what organizing is all about. So when you're thinking about the self-interest of your target, when you are trying to figure out what motivates this person, you want to do a lot of research. You want to figure out where do they work and with whom do they work. So that can mean committees that they sit on, or a lot of state legislators are part-time. Do they have another job? What is that other job? What does it mean for what you can tell about their politics? What does it mean about who can influence them? Who are their major donors or funders? We're going to talk about how to research that in a second. And what major endorsements have they received? That'll let you know who they listen to. Figuring out who they listen to can help you build out your list of secondary targets, the people that have power over the primary target. Other things to research here are public affiliations. So that can be, what campaign promises have they made? Holding people accountable to their campaign promises is an actual tactic. I know we talk a lot, people say whatever on campaign trails, blah, blah, blah. It is an actual thing. It is important for you. It is okay and important for you to say you promised this on a campaign trail and you're not living up to the promises you made. What charities do they attend, or charities do they attend fundraisers for? Are they on the boards of any particular nonprofits in the community? That will also tell you who they're in relationship with and what they care about. And then also their personal values. So are they active in their local religious community? Do they have a particular hobby that takes up a lot of their time that they're really committed to? All of these are ways for you to have a deeper understanding of what this person values. Let me put my finger on the screen here. What this person values and who is in relationship with them. Those are the things that this research allows you to do. So where do you find this stuff? Great points, Elyssa. I'm so glad you told me all of this. Sounds really overwhelming. I'm very happy to tell you that you can find this stuff on the internet, which is great. I love the internet. So you can find this information on places like Open Secrets, which tracks federal dollars in elections, followthemoney.org, the FEC. Your state probably has its own database for who is giving political donations for state-based candidates. And by probably, I mean definitely, but some of them are better than others. There's also Google, you may have heard of it, and there's your local newspaper. The local newspaper is really helpful because you can see what are the issues that people keep writing op-eds about. What is getting major coverage in your local paper that your elected official probably needs to respond to, because I guarantee you that their staff is reading that paper. So having a sense of what's going on in your community, who has power, who's driving the conversation, all of these are ways for you to identify what moves the person that you're trying to move. Whew, okay, lots of information. If you've got questions, drop it in the chat, and our good chat monitors will let me know if anything is particularly confusing. Let's keep going. So meeting with your target. Of course, research is a great way to access a lot of this information. And in many cases, you can get most of what you need to know. But there are also going to be times where you need to have a meeting with somebody to figure out what really motivates this other person, or to get a deeper sense of how they feel about your issue. And one of the great things about American politics is that you can really meet with the folks that make these decisions. If you can't meet with your senator, you can very often meet with their staff. You can have conversations with folks to get a deeper sense of what motivates somebody to act. And you want to do this because you are developing an organizing strategy. So in organizing, we have this sort of turn of phrase, which is to say, turning what you have into what you need to get what you want is your organizing strategy. So if the thing that you want is for your state to have on the books a law protecting abortion access, which is something a lot of organizers are working on right now. The thing that you need is for your state legislator, why is that word so hard? Legislatures to pass it, and for the governor or whomever to sign it. That's what you need. Really straightforward. You also need political pressure. You need people to be mobilized. You need people to act. And probably you already have some people, like the people on this call, who want to do that work with you. And so figuring out how you can build your political power allows for you to get closer to what you want. And understanding what motivates your target is the thing that helps you determine what you actually need. So for example, if you need one particular member of your city council to vote for something, and you know that their biggest donor is on your side, then you're going to have a meeting with that biggest donor. And you're going to ask that biggest donor to call that member of your city council because they have power over what you want. So another way of thinking about this is that you have something that your target needs. And your job is to figure out how to demonstrate to your target that you have that thing. So great example, representatives need your votes. Members of Congress need your votes. Governors need your votes. All the way down to the lowest bottom of the ticket, people need your votes. And you have the ability to demonstrate to them that they're not going to get that vote and the vote of all sorts of folks that think and feel like you unless they act a certain way. So part of your job is to figure out how to turn something the target needs into something you have. So if you're like, I get that I'm part of a community that cares about this work, but there's not enough of me, then you've got to go out and get more of you. And I promise you, those people are out there and they are already organizing. There are already people in your community that are taking action on this, and you need to get in relationship with them. You also have to use a tactic to illustrate that they can't get what they need, like your votes, until they give you what you need. And that can be, like we said, could be voting, but it could also be things like making sure that they don't have a terrible day in the press. They really don't want that press. It makes their entire day eaten up by nonsense, and that nonsense is good for us. So you really want to think through, how is it that what does your target need? How can you get that thing? And use different tactics to try and demonstrate that. One of the ways you can do that is through something called a research meeting. So a research meeting is basically a meeting where you sit down with folks and talk about why they might care about an issue, to do some more research, as the name might suggest, on the issue in front of you. So when you're thinking about a research meeting, and that should be one target and 5 to 10 community members, such as yourselves, you want to think about these sort of 4 Ps. The first is purpose. What information do we want to get from this person? How do we expect this person to respond to us? Do we have to challenge them in some way? And I should say that you can have these meetings with primary targets or secondary targets. Person. How much do we already know about this person? What kind of research have we walked into in terms of how they have acted in the community? What do we want them to think of us? Do we want them to think these people are my friends and allies? Do we want them to think these people are a formidable force, or both, or neither? What kind of relationships do we want to have with them? The second 2 Ps are politics and plan. So the politics, what are people saying about the issue we are focusing on? And is this a politically salient issue? So again, to go back to the example of trying to pass a law to protect abortion access in your state. Depending on the state that you're in, you probably have a pretty good sense of what people are saying about your issue. You know if you are in a really blue state or a really red state or in a super purple state, how these issues are impacting your community right now. And so that is something that you want to take into the meeting with you because it is part of the general understanding that you're operating in. You also want to figure out what are the political consequences if this person supports or opposes us. And that can be, is this a risky vote for them? Or it can be, if they oppose us, then we're going to have daily vigils outside of their office for the next 6 months. So you want to think about what those consequences might be. And then you want to plan. So you want to plan the meeting. You want to figure out who's going to ask which questions, what are the specific questions you're going to ask, how do you make sure you walk out of that meeting and know everything you wanted to know. So how do our answers to the questions above, the 4 Ps, affect our plan and what we actually do in the meeting? And what are the logistical aspects we can control to help us achieve our goal? So for example, come to the meeting with the agenda. You set the agenda. You say, hello, Mr. Congressman, I want to talk to you about these things. Having control over the meeting allows for you to really ensure you get what you want out of the meeting. This is the training. That was a lot of information, I know. You can always review this, and your homework is designed to help reinforce a lot of this information. So what I want you all to take away from today's training is the following. The first is that identifying your target's self-interest, so again, that's their values, is key to understanding what motivates them to act. That allows you to know how you're going to challenge them. That allows you to know what keeps them up at night, what scares them, who has particular power over their decision making. All of these are really important and crucial questions for figuring out how you can move forward your organizing strategy. 2, you can often make broad assumptions about your target self-interest. Like we said, it can be self-actualization or self-preservation, but it's better if you do research. And you can do this research in really public ways. And research meetings are one tool in your toolbox to learn more about your target. You can do a lot of research with just the free items at your disposal on the internet. There are going to be times when that's not enough, and there are also going to be times when that's all you're going to get. Sometimes you're going to be in a really hostile county, and so you're not going to be able to get the meeting you want, and so you have to rely on the resource that's in front of you. And there are also going to be times when getting a meeting is really easy, shockingly easy, even if the person you're talking to has really different politics than you. So don't assume, always try and get that meeting. Try to do as much research as possible so you can identify your primary targets, your secondary targets, and what they care about. So with all of that, I'm going to pass it back over to Chris to take us out.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me tell you, I have my notes, okay? As I always tell folks, get your pen and paper because like so much really good information, and especially self-preservation versus self-actualization. I mean, I'm gonna like credit you, but I'm taking some of this, okay?
Please do.
For my own study. But thank you so much. And for those of you who are still with us, like show some love to Elyssa. Like this is really dope. This is really a dope training. And what I appreciate about this so much is that it's all fitting together. So, it's sort of hard because I wish it didn't. Like, I wish we were in a utopia and we wouldn't have to fight for anything and we all have all the things that we need. But that's not the world we live in. And, we're going to deal with what we actually have in front of us. And so thank you so much for digging in with us this week and really giving us some actual tools for our organizing toolboxes. So I appreciate you so much.
Anytime.
Yes. So for those of you who are still with us, that is the hour. It was jam-packed with some great content, great guests. Thank you to Mana Thank you to Elyssa. Thank you to Sonja. Thank you to Sara for digging in with us on today. I am so grateful and thankful. So what happens now? You can join the conversation. It does not have to end now. Join the conversation at moveon.org/mobilizers. All throughout this week, folks will be in conversation with each other, and we will be doing that homework, because guess what? We have homework this week too. I just love the sensation of giving other people homework. It's just so great, because I never did my homework as a kid. Another conversation. But I really appreciate all of you for being here. Again, go to moveon.org/mobilizers to join the community, and really dig in and talk with other folks who are like-minded and who are doing this work and who are preparing themselves for the work ahead at this midterm election. So don't forget, we have one last session coming Sunday, June 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's 5 p.m. Pacific. Again, one more session, Sunday, June 5th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I can't wait to see you there. It's going to be dope. You don't want to miss it. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.